My brother thinks that it is hilarious to trip kids and leave them injured. He was furious when he got a taste of his own medicine. My brother Danny always thought it was hilarious to trip kids when they walked by. He'd stick his foot out at family gatherings and laugh when children stumbled. "It's just a joke. Kids need to learn to watch where they're going," he'd say when parents got upset. At Christmas, he tripped my 5-year-old daughter Mia when she was carrying her new doll. She fell face first onto the tile floor and chipped her front tooth. Danny laughed while blood poured from her mouth. "She's fine. Baby teeth fall out anyway. Stop being so dramatic about everything." My parents defended him like always. "Danny's just playful. He doesn't mean any harm." They paid for Mia's dental work but made it seem like they were doing us a huge favor. Kids get hurt all the time. You can't blame Danny for an accident. It wasn't an accident. I'd watched him deliberately stick his foot out. But nobody else saw it happen, and Danny swore Mia just tripped on her own. "Maybe she needs better balance. You should enroll her in gymnastics or something," he suggested while Mia cried from pain. The dentist said the chip went deep enough to damage the nerve. Mia would need multiple procedures as she grew. She'd have problems with that tooth forever. Danny's response was to buy her a $2 toy and call it even. See? All better. No hard feelings, right, kiddo? He kept doing it to other kids, too. My nephew fell at Easter and skinned both knees. My cousin's toddler tumbled at a birthday party and got a black eye. Danny always had excuses. The kids were running too fast. They were clumsy. They needed to learn coordination. Parents would get angry, but Danny would turn on the charm. "Come on, we all fell as kids. It's part of growing up. I'm actually helping them develop reflexes." My sister-in-law banned him from her house after he tripped her 3-year-old at the top of the stairs. The kid caught himself on the railing but could have died. Danny said she was overreacting. It was just a little tap. The kid needs to learn stair safety anyway. He'd post memes about how his generation was tougher because they survived playground accidents. He'd share articles about helicopter parents making weak children. He'd tell anyone who'd listen that modern parents were too soft and kids needed more rough play to build character. At 4th of July, he tripped my friend's daughter who was carrying sparklers. She fell and burned her arm badly enough to need the emergency room. Danny told everyone she shouldn't have been running with sparklers. That's just common sense. The parents should have been watching her better. The girl's parents wanted to press charges, but Danny convinced our parents to talk them out of it. It would destroy Danny's life over a simple mistake, Mom begged them. "Please don't ruin our family over this." They dropped it, but never came to family events again. Danny saw this as a win. See? They knew they were overreacting. That's why they're too embarrassed to show their faces. More families started avoiding gatherings where Danny would be. He'd complain about how uptight everyone had become. "Nobody can take a joke anymore. Everyone's so sensitive about their precious babies." My husband wanted to cut contact completely, but our parents guilt-tripped us. "Danny's your only brother. You can't let a few mishaps destroy your relationship. Family forgives family." Then Danny had a son, Hunter. Suddenly, Danny became the most protective parent alive. Nobody could even walk near Hunter without Danny hovering. He baby-proofed everything twice. He'd lecture people about child safety constantly. At Hunter's first birthday party, my daughter Mia was walking past Danny's chair when she stopped. She looked at Danny, then at Hunter, who was taking his first wobbling steps toward the cake table. Danny was filming on his phone, completely focused on capturing Hunter's big moment. That's when Mia very deliberately stuck her foot out. Hunter went down hard, face first into the corner of the coffee table. The sound was horrible. Blood everywhere. Hunter's screaming was unlike anything I'd heard. His nose was obviously broken and his front teeth were gone. Danny went insane. "She did that on purpose. Everyone saw it. She tripped my baby. What kind of monster trips a 1-year-old? Mia stood there calmly. "It was just a joke, Uncle Danny. He needs to learn to watch where he's going. Kids fall all the time. It's part of growing up." The entire room went silent. Danny's face went from red to white as he recognized his own words. Nobody moved. Danny sat on the floor holding Hunter against his chest while blood dripped between his fingers and soaked into his shirt. His mouth kept opening and closing, but no sound came out. Hunter's screaming had turned into these awful choking sobs that made my stomach twist. I stood frozen about 6 feet away, my hands clenched so tight my nails cut into my palms. Mia hadn't moved either. She just stood there next to the coffee table with her arms at her sides, watching Danny with this blank expression that made her look like a stranger. The silence felt thick and heavy, like the air before a thunderstorm. Someone's phone was still playing Happy Birthday in the background, the cheerful music making everything feel more wrong. My sister Kylie had her hand over her mouth, staring at the blood on Hunter's face. My mom stood near the kitchen doorway, both hands pressed against her chest. Cooper was closest to Mia, his body angled between her and Danny like he was ready to grab her and run. The whole room smelled like birthday cake and copper. Brooke's scream cut through everything. She dropped to her knees next to Danny and started pawing at Hunter's face, trying to see how bad it was. Her hands came away red. She screamed again, louder this time. words I couldn't make out through her panic. Danny finally found his voice and started yelling that Mia did it on purpose, that everyone saw her stick her foot out, that my daughter deliberately hurt his baby. His face had gone from that shocked white color to dark red, veins standing out on his forehead. Brooke grabbed her phone with shaking hands and tried to dial 911 but kept hitting the wrong numbers. My mom rushed over and took the phone from her, speaking to the operator in this calm voice that didn't match her face. Cooper moved fast, stepping directly in front of Mia and blocking Danny's view of her. I saw the look in my husband's eyes when he glanced back at our daughter. Horror mixed with something else I couldn't name. His jaw was clenched, so tight I could see the muscle jumping. He put his hand on Mia's shoulder and she looked up at him with those same blank eyes. The paramedics got there faster than I expected. Maybe 9 minutes. Someone must have been close by. 2 of them came through the front door with bags and equipment while a third wheeled in a stretcher. They took over from Brooke and Danny, one of them kneeling next to Hunter, while the other asked questions in this quick, efficient voice. What happened? How did he fall? Did he lose consciousness? Any allergies we should know about? Danny kept interrupting to say that Mia tripped him on purpose, pointing at my daughter across the room. The paramedic nodded and wrote something down but focused on Hunter. They got his bleeding under control with gauze and pressure. The lead paramedic said something about possible nasal fracture and dental trauma, that they needed to transport him right away. They lifted Hunter onto the stretcher and Brooke climbed up next to him, still crying. Danny stood up, his shirt covered in blood, and gave a statement to one of the paramedics. He used words like deliberately and witnessed and assault. The paramedic wrote it all down in a little notebook. My mom tried to go with them, but the paramedic said only parents in the ambulance. Danny shot me a look full of hate before they wheeled Hunter out. The door slammed behind them and suddenly the house felt too quiet again. The emergency room waiting area had those plastic chairs bolted to the floor and fluorescent lights that made everyone look sick. We'd followed the ambulance here in our car, Cooper driving while I sat in the back with Mia. Nobody had said a word the whole way. Now we sat in a corner away from Danny and Brooke and my parents. Hospital security had shown up about 10 minutes after we arrived. 2 guys in uniforms with radios on their belts. They talked to Danny first, both of them writing in notebooks while he pointed at Mia. I watched my brother's mouth moving, his hands gesturing, his face still red with anger. One of the security guards looked over at us. Cooper had already made a phone call to his friend Alan, who did criminal defense work. Alan said he'd come down right away, told Cooper not to let anyone question Mia without him there. Cooper relayed this information to me in a whisper, his hand on my knee. I couldn't look at Mia. Every time I tried, my throat closed up and I had to look away. What was I supposed to say to her? What words existed for this situation? The security guards finished with Danny and started walking toward us. Cooper stood up and intercepted them, speaking in a low voice I couldn't hear. They talked for a minute, then the guards nodded and walked away. Cooper sat back down and told me Alan would be here in 15 minutes. We just had to wait. Mia spoke for the first time since we left the party. Her voice came out small but steady, not scared or sorry, just matter of fact. She said she'd been planning this since Christmas, since the day Uncle Danny laughed while blood poured out of her mouth. She described it like she was talking about a school project. How she'd watched Danny trip other kids at family events. How she'd studied the way he did it, the casual foot placement, the fake surprise afterward. How she'd waited for the perfect moment when he'd be distracted and couldn't deny what happened. She said she'd known Hunter's first birthday would be her chance because Danny would be filming and wouldn't see it coming. She'd practiced in her room, she said, figuring out exactly how to position her foot so a toddler would go down hard. Her voice never wavered. She never cried. She looked at me with those calm eyes and said, Uncle Danny needed to learn his lesson, that someone had to show him how it felt. The words came out of her 8-year-old mouth in this flat, practical tone that made my skin crawl. This was my daughter. This was my baby who still slept with a nightlight and got scared during thunderstorms. And she'd spent months planning to hurt a 1-year-old. I felt something cold spread through my chest. Cooper's hand tightened on my knee. His breathing had changed, gotten faster. When I finally looked at him, I saw my own horror reflected back at me. The pediatric specialist came out about an hour later, a woman in scrubs with tired eyes and blood on her shoes. She spoke to Danny and Brooke first, using medical terms I only half understood. Nasal bone fracture, avulsed central incisors, soft tissue trauma to the upper lip and gingiva. She said Hunter would need surgery to set the nose. The teeth were gone completely, roots and all, knocked out on impact. He'd need multiple procedures as he grew, implants when he was older, possible orthodontic intervention. She talked about scarring and nerve damage and years of treatment. Danny's face crumpled. Brooke made this sound like an animal in pain. My mom started crying. I sat there feeling like I might throw up. The specialist kept talking, explaining risks and timelines and referrals to other doctors. Then Brooke turned around and looked at me. The hatred in her eyes made me physically lean back in my chair. She didn't say anything. She didn't have to. Her face said it all. My daughter did this to her baby. My daughter destroyed Hunter's face. My daughter took away his first birthday and replaced it with trauma and surgery and pain. I wanted to say I was sorry, but the words stuck in my throat. What good would sorry do? Sorry didn't fix broken bones or grow back teeth. Brooke turned away like she couldn't stand to look at me anymore. Alan showed up while the specialist was still talking. He was a short guy with dark hair and wire-rimmed glasses, wearing jeans and a polo shirt like he'd been home when Cooper called. He pulled Cooper aside and they talked in low voices while I stayed with Mia. Alan asked questions and Cooper answered them, both of them glancing over at our daughter. Then Alan came over and introduced himself to Mia, speaking to her like she was a regular person, not a child who'd just committed an act of violence. He explained that he was a lawyer, and he was here to help make sure she was treated fairly. He asked if she understood what that meant. Mia nodded. Alan told us that children under 10 couldn't be charged with crimes in our state, that Mia was below the age of criminal responsibility, but he said Child Protective Services would probably investigate. He said Danny could file a civil lawsuit against us for damages. He used words like liability and negligence and financial exposure. The legal reality started sinking in. This wasn't just about what Mia did. This was about what it would cost us. Hospital bills and surgeries and lawyers and possibly losing our house. I looked at Cooper and saw him doing the same math in his head. His face had gone pale. My parents arrived while Alan was explaining our legal situation. My mom rushed over like she was going to hug Mia, but Cooper stepped between them. My dad hung back, looking lost. My mom started talking immediately, her voice high and fast. She said Mia was just a child, that children don't understand consequences, that this was a terrible accident. The word accident made something snap inside me. I stood up so fast my chair scraped backward. I told my mom to stop. She looked at me with surprise. I said Mia wasn't confused and this wasn't an accident. I said Mia understood perfectly because she'd learned from watching them defend Danny for years. Every time Danny hurt a kid, they made excuses. Every time a parent got upset, they smoothed it over. They taught their whole family that hurting children were acceptable as long as you called it a joke afterward. They taught Mia that family loyalty meant protecting the person doing harm instead of the person being hurt. My voice got louder as I talked. Other people in the waiting room were staring, but I didn't care. My mom's face crumpled. She tried to interrupt, but I kept going. I listed every child Danny had hurt, every injury he'd caused, every excuse they'd made. My dad put his hand on my mom's shoulder, but he didn't argue. He just stood there looking old and sad. Danny came storming over, his face twisted with rage. He started yelling that Mia wasn't allowed anywhere near Hunter, that if she came close to his son again, he'd call the police. He said Brooke had to choose right now between staying for Hunter's treatment or leaving to avoid our family. He said he wouldn't be in the same hospital as the child who destroyed his son's face. His voice echoed through the waiting room. Nurses looked over from their station. Security started walking toward us again. Brooke stood behind Danny, crying silently. She looked at me and then at Danny, and I could see her trying to decide. She wanted to stay with Hunter. Of course she did. But Danny was giving her an ultimatum. Choose him or choose to be near us. I watched her face work through it. The security guards arrived and asked everyone to lower their voices or take it outside. Danny pointed at Mia and said she was dangerous, that she shouldn't be allowed around other children. Alan stepped forward and handed the security guards his card, speaking in that calm lawyer voice about his client's rights. The whole scene was chaos. Brooke finally spoke, her voice raw from crying. She told Danny she was staying with Hunter no matter what. She said their son needed his mother. Danny's face went even redder. He looked at his wife like she'd betrayed him. Then he looked at me and said, this was all my fault, that I'd raised a monster. Cooper moved toward Danny, but Alan grabbed his arm. Cooper took Mia home around 9 that night. The security guards had made it clear we needed to leave or they'd remove us. Alan said there was nothing more we could do at the hospital anyway. Cooper gathered our things while I stayed sitting in my chair, unable to move. He came over and put his hand on my shoulder. When I looked up at him, I saw something in his eyes I'd never seen before. Disappointment, maybe. Or sadness. Or both. He said we needed to talk when he got home, that we had a lot to figure out. His voice was gentle but firm. The look he gave me before he left said everything his words didn't. We'd failed. We'd failed as parents and as partners and as protectors. We'd let Mia grow up in an environment where violence was normalized and family loyalty trumped morality. We'd taught her that the adults in her life wouldn't stop bad things from happening, so she had to take matters into her own hands. Cooper took Mia's hand, and they walked out together. I watched them go, my husband and daughter, and felt something break inside me. I stayed at the hospital even though Danny didn't want me there. I moved to a different section of the waiting room where I couldn't see my family. I sat alone in a plastic chair under fluorescent lights and thought about all the times I'd stayed quiet when Danny hurt someone, all the times I'd chosen peace over protection, all the times I'd told myself it wasn't that bad, that family was more important than confrontation. I'd taught Mia that lesson through years of silence. I'd shown her that when someone hurts you, you smile and pretend it's fine because that's what keeps the family together. And now my daughter had learned that lesson so well she'd planned revenge on a baby. I put my head in my hands and finally let myself cry. I stayed until someone from the hospital administration came over around midnight and asked me to leave. They said visiting hours were over and family could return in the morning. The walk to my car felt endless. My legs barely worked. I sat in the driver's seat for 20 minutes before I could turn the key. The engine started and I just stared at the steering wheel. My phone buzzed with a text from Cooper asking if I was okay to drive. I texted back that I was leaving now. The drive home was a blur of streetlights and stop signs. I kept seeing Hunter's face covered in blood. I kept hearing Mia's calm voice repeating Danny's words back to him. When I pulled into our driveway, all the lights were off except Mia's bedroom window. Cooper met me at the door. He looked exhausted. We stood in the entryway not speaking for a long minute. Then he asked if I wanted tea, and I nodded even though I didn't want anything. We sat at the kitchen table with mugs neither of us drank from. He told me Mia went to bed without any fuss. She brushed her teeth and put on pajamas and climbed into bed like it was a normal night. He said she asked if Hunter would be okay, and seemed genuinely worried about the answer. I asked what he told her. He said he told her the truth, that Hunter was badly hurt and would need a lot of medical help. Mia apparently nodded and said she hoped the doctors could fix him. Then she rolled over and went to sleep. Cooper's hands shook as he held his mug. I realized I'd never seen him shake before. He asked me what happened at the hospital after they left. I told him about Danny's ultimatum to Brooke. I told him about the security guards and the chaos. I told him about sitting alone in a different waiting room. He listened without interrupting. When I finished, he set down his mug and looked at me directly. He said we needed to talk about what comes next. His voice was steady, but I could hear the strain underneath. I nodded again because words weren't coming. He said he'd been thinking about this for hours while Mia slept. He said he'd wanted to cut contact with my family for years. He said he'd watched Danny hurt our daughter and other kids and nobody ever stopped him. He said he'd respected my loyalty to my family, but now everything was different. I started to respond, but he held up his hand. He asked me a direct question. He asked if I was proud of what Mia did. The question hung in the air between us. I opened my mouth and nothing came out, because the honest answer was complicated. Part of me was proud. Part of me was horrified. Part of me thought Danny finally got what he deserved. Part of me was devastated that my 8-year-old daughter hurt a baby. I couldn't reconcile those feelings into one answer. Cooper watched my face and I saw something change in his expression. Disappointment, maybe. Or resignation. He said my silence was an answer too. We sat there until almost 2 a.m, not really talking. Just existing in the same space with this huge, terrible thing between us. Finally, he said we should try to sleep. We both knew sleep wouldn't come, but we went through the motions anyway. I checked on Mia before going to our room. She was curled up with her stuffed rabbit, breathing slowly, looking peaceful, looking like a normal kid who hadn't deliberately injured a baby earlier that day. The doorbell rang at 8:30 the next morning. I'd been awake since 6, staring at the ceiling. Cooper answered while I was still in my bathrobe. A woman in business clothes stood on our porch with an official-looking badge. She introduced herself as a Child Protective Services investigator. She said she needed to speak with Mia about yesterday's incident. My stomach dropped. Cooper asked if we needed a lawyer present. The investigator said that was our right, but this was just an initial assessment interview. She seemed calm and professional, not accusatory, just doing her job. I went upstairs to wake Mia while Cooper showed the investigator to our living room. Mia was already awake, sitting up in bed reading a book. I told her someone needed to ask her questions about what happened at Hunter's party. She looked at me with those clear 8-year-old eyes and asked if she was in trouble. I said I didn't know. I said she needed to tell the truth. She nodded and got dressed without complaint. We came downstairs together. The investigator sat on our couch with a notebook. She smiled at Mia and said she just wanted to understand what happened yesterday. Mia sat in the armchair across from her. Cooper and I sat on the love seat. The investigator asked Mia to describe the party in her own words. Mia started talking in that same calm voice from yesterday. She said she went to Hunter's first birthday party with her parents. She said Uncle Danny was there filming Hunter walking. She said she stopped next to Hunter and stuck her foot out when he walked past. She said Hunter fell and hit the table and got hurt badly. The investigator wrote notes. She asked why Mia did that. Mia explained without hesitation. She said Uncle Danny trips kids all the time. She said he tripped her at Christmas, and she chipped her tooth and it still hurts sometimes. She said he tripped other kids at other parties and they got hurt too. She said she'd been watching him do it for years. She said she waited for the right time to teach him how it feels. The investigator's pen stopped moving. She looked at Mia with this expression I couldn't read. Concerned, but also something else. She asked how long Mia had been planning this. Mia thought about it. She said since Christmas. She said she knew Uncle Danny would never stop unless someone showed him what it was like. She said grown-ups kept making excuses for him, so she decided to handle it herself. The investigator asked if Mia understood that Hunter was just a baby who didn't do anything wrong. Mia nodded. She said she felt bad that Hunter got hurt. She said she didn't want to hurt Hunter specifically. She said she wanted to hurt Uncle Danny's feelings the way Uncle Danny hurt hers. She said babies are small and fall easily just like she was small and fell easily when Uncle Danny tripped her. The investigator wrote more notes. She asked if Mia thought about other ways to solve the problem. Mia said she told her mom that Uncle Danny was mean, but nothing changed. She said she thought about telling a teacher, but it only happened at family parties. She said she thought about not going to family parties, but her grandparents would be sad. She said tripping Hunter seemed like the only way to make Uncle Danny understand. The investigator's expression grew more concerned with each answer. She asked Mia if she would do something like this again. Mia said no, because Uncle Danny learned his lesson now. She said she didn't want to hurt anyone else. She said she just wanted Uncle Danny to stop tripping kids. The interview lasted almost an hour. The investigator asked about school and friends, and if Mia ever got in fights. Mia answered everything honestly. She had friends. She liked school. She'd never been in a fight. She'd never hurt another kid before yesterday. When the investigator finished, she thanked Mia and asked her to go play in her room for a few minutes. Mia left without argument. The investigator turned to Cooper and me. She said she needed to be direct. She said Mia's level of planning and calculation was extremely concerning for an 8-year-old. She said most children that age don't have the capacity for that kind of premeditated action. She said the way Mia talked about it showed sophisticated reasoning about cause and effect and revenge. She said this wasn't a typical childhood incident. She asked about Mia's mental health history. I told her Mia had never seen a therapist. The investigator strongly recommended we get Mia evaluated by a child psychologist immediately. She said she'd be filing a report and we'd hear about next steps. She said depending on the evaluation, there might be ongoing monitoring. She left her card and walked out. Cooper and I sat in silence after she left. The weight of what just happened pressed down on both of us. I called 3 child psychologists that morning. The first 2 couldn't see us for weeks. The third had a cancellation that afternoon at 2. I took it. Cooper said he'd come with us. We told Mia we were going to see a doctor who talks to kids. She asked if it was because of Hunter. I said yes. She asked if the doctor would be mad at her. I said no, the doctor just wanted to help. The psychologist's office was in a building near the hospital. Beige walls and soft lighting and toys in the waiting room. A woman came out and introduced herself as Dr. Jang. She shook Mia's hand and asked if she wanted to come back to her office. Mia looked at me and I nodded. They disappeared down a hallway. Cooper and I sat in the waiting room with magazines neither of us read. The receptionist offered us coffee. We both declined. Other parents came and went with their kids. Normal appointments for normal problems. We sat there knowing our situation was different. An hour passed. Then another. I watched the clock on the wall. Each minute felt like 10. I thought about all the ways I'd failed Mia. All the times I should have protected her from Danny. All the family gatherings where I stayed quiet while he hurt children. I'd taught her through my silence that family loyalty mattered more than safety. I'd shown her that adults wouldn't stop bad things from happening. So she took matters into her own hands, and now my 8-year-old was evaluated to see if she was dangerous to other children. Cooper reached over and took my hand. His palm was sweaty. We sat there holding hands and waiting. Finally, Dr. Jang came out. She asked if we could come back to her office. We followed her down the hallway. Mia wasn't there. Dr. Jang said she was in another room doing some activities with an assistant. She asked us to sit. Her office had diplomas on the walls and books about child development. She had a serious expression. She said she'd spent 2 hours with Mia doing various assessments and interviews. She said she needed to ask us some questions about family history and Mia's behavior patterns. We answered everything. She took notes. Then she gave us her preliminary assessment. She said Mia showed clear understanding of right and wrong. She said Mia demonstrated empathy for Hunter's pain. She said Mia also maintained that her uncle deserved consequences. She said this combination was concerning for a child Mia's age. She said most 8-year-olds don't have the capacity to hold both empathy for a victim and justification for harming them simultaneously. She said it showed sophisticated moral reasoning that was developmentally unusual. She asked if we wanted her honest opinion. We both nodded. She said Mia wasn't a danger to random children. She said this wasn't about general violence or lack of empathy. She said this was about a specific calculated response to a specific pattern of harm. She said Mia essentially appointed herself as judge and executioner because the adults in her life failed to provide justice. She said that kind of thinking in an 8-year-old was deeply troubling. She recommended weekly therapy sessions for at least 6 months. She said Mia needed to learn healthier ways to process anger and seek justice. She said Mia needed to understand that hurting others is never acceptable even when you're trying to stop harm. She said we as parents needed family therapy too because this didn't happen in a vacuum. She said enabling family members and staying silent about abuse taught Mia that she had to take action herself. Her words hit like physical blows. She was right about everything. We scheduled weekly appointments starting next week. We paid the receptionist and collected Mia from the other room. She asked if everything was okay. I said yes, even though nothing was okay. We drove home in silence. Mia fell asleep in the back seat. Cooper and I didn't speak. When we got home, Mia went to her room to play. Cooper and I stood in the kitchen. He said we needed to talk tonight after Mia went to bed. His tone made it clear this would be a serious conversation. I said okay. We spent the rest of the day going through motions, making dinner, eating at the table, pretending everything was normal. Mia seemed fine. She talked about her book and asked if we could go to the park this weekend. We said maybe. After dinner, she had a bath and got ready for bed. I read her a story. She fell asleep quickly. I went downstairs where Cooper was waiting at the kitchen table. He had 2 glasses of wine poured. I sat down across from him. He started talking, and I listened. He said he'd been wanting to cut contact with my family for years. He said he'd watched Danny hurt Mia, and said nothing because I asked him to keep the peace. He said he'd watched my parents enable Danny, and he'd stayed quiet out of respect for my loyalty. He said he'd failed as a father by not protecting Mia from my family. He said yesterday changed everything. He said he couldn't pretend anymore that family harmony was worth this cost. He asked me directly if I was proud of what Mia did. The question again. I still didn't have a clean answer. I said part of me was proud. I said part of me thought Danny deserved it. I said part of me was horrified. I said I couldn't separate those feelings. Cooper nodded like he expected that answer. He said that was the problem. He said I'd been so conditioned to protect my family that I couldn't fully condemn what Mia did, even though she hurt a baby. He said my inability to draw a clear line was exactly why Mia thought violence was acceptable. He wasn't yelling. He wasn't even angry. He was just sad and disappointed, and that was worse. We talked until midnight. We talked about boundaries and family and how to move forward. We talked about what we owed Mia versus what we owed my parents. We talked about whether our marriage could survive this. That last part scared me most. Cooper said he loved me, but he didn't know if he could forgive me for putting Mia in danger for years. I said I didn't know if I could forgive myself. We went to bed without resolution. Just 2 people who'd failed their daughter in different ways trying to figure out how to do better. The next morning, I woke up with Cooper's words still running through my head. We'd failed Mia. We'd put family peace over her safety. I made coffee and sat at the kitchen table staring at my phone. 3 missed calls from my mother. 2 texts from Danny calling me horrible names. 1 message from Kylie asking if I was okay. I deleted Danny's texts without reading them fully. The words I caught were enough. Monster. Terrible mother. Ruining his life. I was about to put my phone down when it buzzed again. Unknown number. I almost ignored it, but something made me answer. A man's voice asked if this was Danny's sister. I said yes. He introduced himself as Tiago. The name took me a second to place. Then I remembered. Easter. His son fell and skinned both knees. Danny had laughed about clumsy kids needing better coordination. Tiago said he heard about what happened at Hunter's party. He said he needed to tell me something. His voice shook as he talked. He said that Easter day when his son fell, he saw everything. He watched Danny stick his foot out deliberately. He watched his 3-year-old go down hard on the concrete patio. He said he was about to call the police right there. He had his phone in his hand ready to dial. Then my mother found him. She begged him not to ruin Danny's life over an accident. But she cried and said Danny was going through a hard time at work. She said Danny would never hurt a child on purpose. She offered to pay for any medical bills. She promised Danny would apologize and it would never happen again. Tiago said he believed her because she seemed so sincere. He thought maybe he'd misread the situation. He let it go. But it wasn't an accident. He knew that now. He said he had photos from that day. Time-stamped photos showing Danny's foot extended right before his son fell. He said he kept them because something felt wrong even though he didn't report it. He asked if other parents had similar evidence. I told him yes. I told him about the sparkler incident. I told him about the stairs. I told him about Mia's tooth. He was quiet for a long time. Then he said Danny's face going pale when he heard his own words repeated back was justice. Not the right kind of justice. Not the legal kind. But justice nonetheless. He said he was documenting everything now. Writing down dates and details while they were fresh. He said if other parents wanted to come forward, he'd stand with them. We talked for another 20 minutes. He gave me his email address. I thanked him and hung up feeling shaky. That afternoon, another message came through social media. A woman named Amelie. She said mutual friends told her about Hunter's party. She said she needed to share something with me. She sent photos before I could respond. A little girl's arm covered in burns. Angry red patches that looked painful even in pictures. Then hospital records. Second-degree burns requiring skin grafts. Multiple surgeries. Permanent scarring. I stared at my phone screen feeling sick. This was from the sparkler incident. 4th of July 2 years ago. Amelie's daughter. I remembered that day. I remembered Danny saying the girl shouldn't have been running. I remembered him blaming the parents for not watching better. I remembered my mother convincing them not to press charges. Emily's message continued. She said Danny told everyone her daughter was running wild. He said she was out of control. He said the parents were negligent. He made them feel guilty for their daughter getting hurt. She said she believed him at first. She blamed herself. She thought maybe she should have been watching closer. Then she talked to other parents at the school. Parents who'd seen Danny trip kids before. Parents who warned each other to watch their children around him. She realized it wasn't an accident. She asked if I knew Danny tried to blame her parenting. I sat there staring at her message. I knew. I'd been there. I'd heard Danny say those exact things. I'd watched him twist the narrative to make himself the victim. I'd stayed silent. I typed back that I was sorry. That I should have spoken up. That I failed her daughter and mine. She responded quickly. She said she wasn't looking for apologies. She was looking for documentation. She wanted to know if I'd testify about Danny's pattern if it came to that. She wanted to know if other parents would stand together. I said yes. I gave her Tiago's contact information. I told her I'd help however I could. That night after Mia went to bed, I opened my laptop. Cooper was reading in the living room. I started a new document. I titled it simply, Incidents. Then I began typing. Every event I could remember. Every child Danny had hurt. I started with Mia at Christmas. 5 years old. Chipped tooth. Nerve damage. Multiple procedures needed. Permanent problems. I included the date, the location, the witnesses present, Danny's exact words afterward. I moved to Easter. Tiago's son. 3 years old. Both knees skinned on concrete patio. Danny's foot deliberately extended. My mother's intervention. Requested Reds is on Spotify now. Check out link in the description or comments the photos Tiago mentioned. I kept going. The birthday party. My cousin's toddler. Black eye from hitting a table corner. Danny's excuse about clumsy kids. The parents who stopped coming to family events. The stairs incident. Kylie's 3-year-old. Could have died. Caught himself on the railing. Danny calling it a tap. Kylie banning him from her house. 4th of July. Emily's daughter. Sparklers and burns. Emergency room visit. 2nd-degree burns. Skin grafts. Permanent scars. Danny blaming the parents. My mother convincing them not to press charges. I typed for 2 hours. The document grew longer. 7 years of incidents. Some I'd witnessed directly. Others I'd heard about from family members. Each entry included dates when I could remember them. Witnesses who were present. Medical outcomes. Danny's responses. The pattern was undeniable. Not accidents. Not kids being clumsy. Deliberate actions repeated over years. A clear history of hurting children and facing no real consequences. I saved the document. I called Cooper into the kitchen. He sat down and read it. His face got darker with each paragraph. When he finished, he looked at me. He asked why I kept bringing Mia to events where Danny was present. The question hit like a physical blow. I had no good answer. I said they were family. The words sounded hollow even as I spoke them. Cooper asked if family was worth this. Worth 7 years of children getting hurt. Worth Mia learning that violence was acceptable. Worth Hunter's broken face. I couldn't answer. He was right. Family wasn't worth this. It never had been. 2 days later, the CPS investigator called. She wanted to update me on her assessment. She said she'd interviewed Danny that morning. I asked how it went. She paused before answering. She said professionally she couldn't share details. Then she said off the record, Danny's lack of self-awareness was remarkable. She said he spent the entire session raging about Mia being dangerous. He talked about pressing charges. He talked about how violent children needed to be controlled. He described Mia as calculating and cruel. The investigator asked about his own history with children. He refused to discuss it. He said it was irrelevant. He said people were lying about him. He said parents were making up stories because they were jealous or had grudges. The investigator said she'd never seen someone so completely unable to see their own behavior. She said Danny's focus was entirely on being the victim. He showed no awareness that his actions created this situation. She said her concern now wasn't just about Mia. She was concerned about Hunter's safety. A parent who can't acknowledge his own pattern of hurting children might not protect his child properly. She said she was recommending ongoing monitoring. I thanked her and hung up. Part of me felt relief that someone official saw through Danny. Part of me felt guilty that Hunter might suffer because of my daughter's actions. The next day, Kylie called. She said Brooke had moved out, packed up Hunter, and went to stay with her parents. She told Danny she needed time to process everything she was learning about his past. Kylie said Brooke was asking questions, talking to other parents, reading through old social media posts where Danny bragged about kids needing tougher treatment. She was seeing her husband clearly for the first time. Kylie said Brooke looked devastated, like her whole marriage was a lie. I felt guilty relief wash over me. Relief that Brooke was protecting Hunter. Relief that she was finally seeing what Danny really was. But guilt because my daughter's violence broke apart their family. Guilt because a baby got hurt. Guilt because this could have been prevented years ago if I'd been brave enough to stand up to Danny and my parents. Kylie said Brooke wanted to talk to me eventually. Not now, but when she was ready. She had questions about Danny's history. She wanted to know everything. I said I'd talk to her whenever she was ready. I owed her that much. That evening, Mia came into the kitchen while I was making dinner. She stood in the doorway watching me chop vegetables. Then she asked if I was mad at her for hurting Hunter. The question froze me. I put down the knife. I looked at my daughter, 8 years old. Dark hair pulled back in a ponytail. Her chipped front tooth visible when she talked. I struggled to find words. I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say hurting a baby was wrong no matter what. But I also understood why she did it. I understood the anger that built up watching Uncle Danny hurt kids and get away with it. I understood feeling helpless when adults wouldn't protect you. I sat down at the kitchen table. I told Mia to sit with me. She climbed into the chair across from me. I took a deep breath. I told her that hurting babies is always wrong. Even when you're angry at their parents. Even when their parents deserve consequences. Hunter didn't do anything wrong. He was just a baby taking his first steps. She nodded slowly. Then I told her that I failed her. I failed to protect her from Uncle Danny years ago. I should have stopped bringing her to family events where Danny was present. I should have stood up to him when he hurt her. I should have believed her safety was more important than family peace. I told her that what she did was wrong, but I understood why she did it. She'd learned from watching our family that violence was acceptable if you had good reasons. She'd learned that adults wouldn't protect her, so she had to protect herself. Those were the wrong lessons, and I taught them to her by staying silent. Mia's eyes filled with tears. She said she just wanted Uncle Danny to stop hurting kids. She said she thought if he felt what it was like, he'd understand. She said she was sorry Hunter got hurt. I pulled her into a hug. We sat there crying together. Two people who'd both made terrible choices trying to figure out how to do better. 3 days later, my mother called. She said we needed to have a formal family intervention. She'd hired a professional mediator. She said everyone needed to move forward for the sake of family unity. She said this had gone on long enough. I asked if Danny would be there. She said yes. I asked if he knew Mia would be there. She hesitated. She said Danny refused to attend if Mia was present. I told my mother we were bringing Mia anyway. She deserved to face what her actions caused. She needed to see the full consequences. My mother started arguing. She said it wasn't appropriate. She said Mia was too young. She said it would be too traumatic. I cut her off. I told her Mia was old enough to plan revenge. She was old enough to face the results. My mother went quiet. Then she said fine. She gave me the date and address. A neutral location. A therapist's office downtown. Saturday afternoon. I hung up and told Cooper. He looked worried. He asked if I was sure about bringing Mia. I said no, but I was doing it anyway. Saturday arrived too fast. We drove downtown in silence. Mia sat in the back seat looking nervous. She asked what would happen at the meeting. I told her honestly I didn't know. We'd all talk about what happened. We'd try to figure out how to move forward. She asked if Uncle Danny would yell at her. I said probably. She nodded and looked out the window. We parked and walked into the building. The therapist's office was on the 3rd floor. Neutral colors, comfortable chairs arranged in a circle, a box of tissues on the side table. The mediator introduced herself. Professional woman in her 40s. Calm voice. She explained the ground rules. Everyone gets to speak. No interrupting. No name calling. Focus on moving forward, not assigning blame. My parents arrived next. My mother hugged me stiffly. My father nodded at Cooper. They both looked at Mia but didn't say anything. Then Danny walked in. His face went red when he saw Mia. He started yelling immediately. He said he told them she couldn't be here. He said this was unacceptable. He said he was leaving. The mediator stepped in. She asked Danny to sit down. She reminded him this was a safe space for everyone. She said Mia had as much right to be here as anyone. Danny sat down but kept glaring at Mia. Kylie arrived last. She sat next to me and squeezed my hand. The mediator started the session. She asked Danny to share his feelings about what happened. Danny launched into a rant. He talked about his son's broken nose, his missing teeth, the surgeries ahead, the permanent damage. He talked about Mia being violent and dangerous. He said she needed to be in juvenile detention. He said our family raised a monster. He went on for 10 minutes. The mediator finally stopped him. She asked Mia if she wanted to respond. Mia looked small in her chair, but her voice was steady. She said she was sorry Hunter got hurt. She said she wished she'd found a different way. But she said Uncle Danny needed to learn his lesson. She said he'd been hurting kids for years and nobody stopped him. Her calm composure seemed to make Danny angrier. He started yelling again, calling her names, saying she was evil. The mediator had to raise her voice to get control back. Then Kylie spoke up. She asked Danny directly how many children he'd tripped over the years. Danny said that was irrelevant. Kylie said it was completely relevant. She started listing names and dates. Her son at the stairs, 3 years old, could have died. Tiago's son at Easter, skinned knees on concrete. Emily's daughter with the sparklers, second-degree burns, skin grafts. My cousin's toddler with the black eye. Mia with the chipped tooth and nerve damage. She went through the whole list. Danny tried to interrupt, but Kylie kept going. The mediator's expression shifted as she listened. She looked at Danny differently now. She asked if all of this was true. Danny said it was all exaggerated. He said kids fall. He said accidents happen. The mediator asked if he ever deliberately tripped children. Danny said no. Then he said maybe once or twice as a joke. Then he said they needed to learn coordination. His story kept changing. The mediator's face got harder. My mother jumped in trying to defend Danny. She said he never meant serious harm. She said he was just playful. She said modern parents were too sensitive. Cooper reached into his bag. He pulled out a folder. He said he'd collected medical records from other parents. He spread them across the table. Hospital bills, doctor's notes, photos of injuries, documentation of broken bones, burns, dental damage, trauma spanning 7 years. The mediator picked up the papers. She read through them slowly. Her face got paler with each page. When she finished, she looked at my parents. She asked them directly how they justified this pattern. How they watched their son hurt children repeatedly and did nothing. How they convinced other parents not to press charges. How they enabled abuse for years. My mother started crying. My father sat frozen. Danny stood up and said this was ridiculous. He said everyone was ganging up on him. He said his son was the real victim here. The mediator asked him to sit down. Danny refused. He walked out. The session fell apart after that. We waited in the hallway while Danny met with his lawyer. Through the glass window, I watched them talk. The lawyer kept shaking his head. He pointed at papers spread across the table. Danny's face got redder with each page the lawyer showed him. His hands clenched into fists. The lawyer put his hand on Danny's shoulder like he was trying to calm him down. Danny shoved the papers away. He stood up fast enough that his chair fell over. The lawyer gestured for him to sit back down. Danny paced the small room instead. He pulled at his hair. He kicked the fallen chair. The lawyer gathered up all the papers and put them in his briefcase. He said something that made Danny stop pacing. Danny's shoulders slumped forward. He sat down on the edge of the table. The lawyer kept talking. Danny covered his face with his hands. After 20 minutes, the lawyer came out alone. He walked past us without making eye contact. Danny stayed in the room. Through the window, I saw him sitting there with his head in his hands. My mother started to go in, but Cooper stopped her. He said Danny needed a minute. We stood there in awkward silence. Finally, Danny came out. His eyes were red. He looked at me but didn't say anything. He walked past all of us and left the building. My mother called after him, but he didn't stop. The second mediation session happened 3 days later. Danny didn't show up. The mediator checked her phone and said he'd sent a message that he wouldn't be attending. My mother looked devastated. She kept asking where he was and why he wasn't coming. The mediator said we could still proceed without him. Brooke arrived right on time. She looked different somehow, more put together. She sat down across from my parents and me. Mia was with Cooper in the waiting area this time. The mediator asked Brooke how she was doing. Brooke took a deep breath. She said she'd been doing a lot of research. She'd been talking to a therapist about everything she'd learned. She said the therapist helped her understand patterns she'd been missing. My mother leaned forward in her chair. She asked what kind of patterns. Brooke pulled out a folder from her bag. She said her therapist specialized in personality disorders. She'd described Danny's behavior to the therapist. The trips, the laughing, the way he targeted small children who couldn't defend themselves. The therapist used words like sadistic traits. She talked about people who get pleasure from causing pain to vulnerable targets. Brooke's voice shook as she explained this. She said she'd been married to Danny for 4 years and never saw it. Or maybe she saw it but didn't want to believe it. She described watching old family videos after the party, seeing Danny's face when kids fell, the smile that appeared just before impact, the way his eyes lit up when children cried. She said once you know what to look for, you can't unsee it. My mother started crying. She said that wasn't fair. She said Danny made mistakes, but he wasn't a monster. Brooke looked at her directly. She asked how many mistakes it takes before it becomes a pattern. She asked how many hurt children it takes before it stops being accidents. My mother couldn't answer. The mediator let the silence sit for a moment. Then she turned to Brooke. She asked what Brooke needed to feel safe allowing Danny around Hunter again. Brooke laughed, but it wasn't a happy sound. She said she wasn't sure she ever would feel safe. The mediator asked her to explain. Brooke said, learning your husband hurt children for fun changes everything. It changes how you see every interaction, every smile, every word. She said she'd been replaying their whole relationship in her head, wondering what else she missed, wondering what he was capable of. She said she couldn't trust her own judgment anymore. If she missed something this big about the person she married, then what else was she wrong about? My father asked if she was thinking about divorce. Brooke said she was already consulting an attorney. She'd had her first meeting 2 days ago. She said she couldn't stay married to someone who enjoyed hurting children. She couldn't let Hunter grow up thinking that behavior was normal. My mother gasped. She said Brooke was overreacting. She said every marriage had problems. She said Danny loved Hunter more than anything. Brooke cut her off. She said Danny loving Hunter didn't mean Hunter was safe. She said people who hurt vulnerable targets don't stop just because one of those targets belongs to them. She said her lawyer was already drafting custody papers. She wanted sole custody with supervised visits only. My mother begged her to reconsider. She said Danny would change. She said he'd get help. Brooke asked why he should change now when he'd been doing this for 7 years without consequences. The mediator was about to speak when the door opened. Mia walked in by herself. Cooper jumped up from his chair in the hallway, but Mia had already crossed the room. She stood in front of Brooke. Nobody said anything. Mia looked small standing there in her purple shirt. She twisted her hands together. Then she spoke. She told Brooke she was sorry Hunter got hurt. She said she wished she'd found a different way to stop Danny. Her voice was steady but quiet. She said she knew hurting a baby was wrong no matter what his dad did. She said she thought about Hunter every day. She wondered if he was okay. She wondered if he was scared. She said she was sorry. The apology sounded real. Not rehearsed. Just honest. Brooke's face changed. Her expression softened for just a second. Then she looked at me. She asked why I never stopped Danny from hurting Mia. The question hit me like a punch. I opened my mouth but no words came out. Brooke kept staring at me. She said Mia was my daughter. She said I watched Danny chip her tooth. I watched her bleed. I knew it wasn't an accident. So why didn't I protect her? Why didn't I keep her away from him? Why did I let it keep happening? I still couldn't answer. My throat felt tight. Brooke said that's what she thought. She said I sacrificed my own daughter to keep family peace. She said I taught Mia that violence was acceptable as long as it stayed in the family. She said I was just as responsible as Danny for what happened to Hunter. The words burned. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. She was right. The mediator finally stepped in. She said everyone needed to take a breath. She asked me if I wanted to respond to Brooke's question. I swallowed hard. I said I was raised to keep family peace. I said I trusted my parents would handle problems. I said I believed family should stay together no matter what. The words sounded hollow even as I said them. The mediator nodded slowly. She said I'd sacrificed my daughter's safety for family harmony. She said I'd shown Mia that keeping quiet was more important than stopping harm. She said I'd taught my daughter that violence is how you solve problems when adults won't protect you. She said Mia learned her lesson well. She learned that if grown-ups won't stop bad behavior, then you have to take justice into your own hands. She said that's why we were all sitting here. Because I'd failed to protect my daughter. Because my parents had failed to hold Danny accountable. Because we'd all chosen comfort over safety. I felt tears running down my face. I couldn't argue with anything she said. Cooper reached over and took my hand. Mia stood there watching me cry. My mother tried to defend me. She said I was a good mother. She said I did my best. The mediator held up her hand. She said this wasn't about blame. It was about understanding how we got here. She said we all played a role in creating an environment where a child felt violence was her only option. Cooper cleared his throat. Everyone looked at him. He said he needed to say something. He said he'd been in therapy since the party. He was seeing someone twice a week. The therapist was helping him process his own guilt. My mother asked what he had to feel guilty about. Cooper laughed bitterly. He said he'd failed as a father. He said he'd known Danny was dangerous. He'd wanted to cut contact years ago. But he'd let me convince him to keep trying. He'd let me prioritize my family over our daughter's safety. He said he'd watched Mia get hurt and done nothing. He'd watched other kids get hurt and stayed quiet. He said he'd failed to protect his daughter from someone he knew was harmful. He looked at me. He said he was struggling with whether he could forgive himself. Then he paused. He said he was struggling with whether he could forgive me. The words hung in the air. I felt like I couldn't breathe. My mother started to protest, but my father put his hand on her arm. Cooper said he loved me. He said he wanted our marriage to work. But he couldn't pretend this hadn't changed things. He couldn't pretend I hadn't chosen my brother over our daughter. He said we had a lot of work to do. He said he wasn't sure we could fix this. Mia walked over to him. She climbed into his lap, even though she was getting too big for that. Cooper wrapped his arms around her. They sat there holding each other while the rest of us watched. My father stood up suddenly. He walked to the window. His back was to all of us. His shoulders shook. My mother went to him. She put her hand on his back. He turned around. His face was wet with tears. He said they needed to tell the truth. My mother started to speak, but he shook his head. He said they'd enabled Danny. He said they'd known what he was doing and looked the other way. He said admitting their son deliberately hurt children were too painful to face. So they'd made excuses. They'd convinced themselves it was accidents. They'd convinced other parents not to press charges. They'd paid people off to keep quiet. My mother was crying now too. My father said he'd seen Danny trip Mia at Christmas. He'd been standing right there. He saw Danny's foot go out. He saw the deliberate movement. He saw Mia fall. And he'd chosen to believe it was an accident. Because the alternative meant his son was cruel. It meant he'd raised someone capable of hurting children for fun. He said he couldn't face that truth. So he'd lied to himself. He'd lied to everyone. My mother sobbed. She said she knew too. She said she'd seen Danny trip the child at the stairs. She'd watched it happen. She'd seen how close that baby came to dying. And she'd still defended Danny. She said she didn't know how to stop. She didn't know how to admit her son was dangerous. The mediator let them cry. She didn't try to comfort them or make it better. She just let them sit with what they'd done. After several minutes, the mediator spoke. She said she was recommending we all pursue individual therapy before attempting more joint sessions. She said the problems ran too deep for quick fixes. She said we needed to process our own roles separately before we could heal together. She looked at my parents specifically. She said they needed to work through their role in creating an environment where a child felt violence was her only option for justice. She said they'd taught their whole family that protecting the abuser was more important than protecting victims. She said they'd shown everyone that family loyalty meant staying quiet about harm. She said that pattern had to break. My mother asked how long therapy would take. The mediator said that wasn't the right question. She said this wasn't about checking a box. It was about fundamental change in how we related to each other. She said some families never recovered from this level of dysfunction. Some families stayed broken. She said whether we could rebuild depended on whether we were willing to do the hard work. She scheduled individual appointments for each of us. She said we'd reconvene in 3 months to assess progress. She said Danny would need to attend his own therapy before any family sessions could include him. She said Brooke and Hunter's safety had to be the priority. Everything else came second. 2 weeks later, Cooper got a call from Danny's lawyer. I was making dinner when his phone rang. Cooper answered and his face went pale. He put the phone on speaker. The lawyer said he was dropping the civil case. He said after reviewing all the evidence other families had provided, he couldn't recommend moving forward. He said pursuing damages against Mia would expose Danny to multiple criminal complaints. He said several families had contacted the police. They were willing to testify about Danny's pattern of deliberately hurting children. He said the DA's office was reviewing the cases. He said if Danny pushed forward with suing us, then those criminal investigations would accelerate. He said his professional advice was to drop everything and hope the criminal cases went away. Cooper asked if Danny agreed. The lawyer paused. He said Danny wasn't happy about it, but he understood the legal reality. He said Danny was angry at us for destroying his life. Cooper said Danny destroyed his own life. The lawyer didn't respond to that. He just said the papers would be filed by end of week. The case would be dismissed. We'd never hear from him again regarding legal action. He hung up. I stood there holding a spatula. I felt relief wash over me. We wouldn't lose our house. We wouldn't be financially destroyed. But the relief felt wrong somehow. I was glad my brother faced consequences only because the law forced him. Not because he felt sorry. Not because he understood what he'd done. Just because getting justice for Hunter meant admitting he'd hurt dozens of other children. Cooper saw my face. He said I couldn't control Danny's choices. I could only control my own. He said being relieved about the lawsuit was okay. It didn't make me a bad person. 3 days after that, Brooke called me. Her voice sounded tired. She said she'd filed for divorce. She was requesting sole custody with supervised visitation only. She'd cited Danny's pattern of enjoying harm to children as evidence he was unfit for unsupervised parenting. She said her lawyer had included all the medical records from other families. She'd included statements from parents describing what Danny had done. She'd included the therapist's evaluation about sadistic personality traits. She said the custody evaluator was already recommending supervised visits. She said Danny would need years of therapy before he'd be allowed alone with Hunter. I asked how Hunter was doing. She said he was healing physically. The surgeries had gone well, but he woke up crying at night. He was scared of strangers now. He clung to her constantly. She said he was too young to remember what happened, but his body remembered the trauma. I asked if she needed anything. She said no. She just wanted me to know she was protecting her son. She said she wished someone had protected all those other children years ago. She said maybe if someone had stopped Danny back then, Hunter wouldn't have been hurt. I said I was sorry. She said sorry didn't fix anything. Then she hung up. I sat there holding my phone. 20 minutes later, Danny called. I almost didn't answer, but I picked up. He started screaming immediately. He said I'd destroyed his family. He said Brooke was taking his son. He said I'd turned everyone against him. He said this was all my fault. I listened to him rage. When he finally stopped, I spoke. I told him he destroyed his own family by being cruel for years. I told him he hurt children and laughed about it. I told him he got exactly what he deserved. Then I hung up. He called back 3 times. I didn't answer. Cooper asked if I was okay. I said I didn't know, but I was done protecting Danny. I was done choosing him over everyone else. I was done pretending family loyalty meant accepting abuse. Cooper pulled me close. We stood in the kitchen holding each other while my phone kept ringing. Mia's therapy sessions became our weekly routine. Every Tuesday afternoon, I'd drive her to the office with the soft blue walls and wait while she talked to someone who actually listened. The therapist called me in after the 4th week and said Mia was making progress. She explained that my daughter understood she'd hurt a baby and was starting to feel bad about it in a real way, not just because she got caught. I asked what that meant. The therapist said Mia had spent years watching adults protect Danny while kids got hurt, and she'd learned that family loyalty meant staying quiet about bad things. She'd internalized that speaking up was betraying family, so she'd planned revenge instead. I sat in that chair feeling like someone had punched me in the stomach. My 8-year-old had carried that weight alone, because I'd taught her silence was more important than safety. Cooper and I started seeing a different therapist together on Thursday evenings. The first session was awkward and tense. We sat on opposite ends of the couch while the therapist asked us why we were there. Cooper said we needed to figure out how to move forward after everything that happened exposed how different we were about family. The therapist asked what he meant. Cooper looked at me and said he resented me for putting my parents' feelings ahead of our daughter's safety for years. He said he'd wanted to cut contact with Danny after the Christmas incident, but I'd guilt-tripped him into staying connected. I wanted to argue, but I couldn't. He was right. I'd chosen keeping peace with my birth family over protecting Mia. The therapist asked how that made me feel. I said it made me feel like a terrible mother. Cooper reached over and took my hand. He said we were both terrible parents in different ways, and we needed to fix it together. The detective called me on a Monday morning while I was folding laundry. She said Tiago and Emily had both filed official police reports about what Danny did to their kids. Other parents were coming forward too. She said they were building a case showing a clear pattern of behavior over many years. I asked if Danny would face charges. She paused. She said prosecution was complicated because so much time had passed and most witnesses had stayed quiet when the incidents happened. She explained that without immediate reports and medical documentation tying injuries directly to Danny's actions, building a criminal case was tough. But the pattern mattered for other legal proceedings. I asked what that meant. She said family court would care a lot about evidence that Danny deliberately hurt children. I thanked her and hung up. Then I called Kylie and told her what the detective said. Kylie said she'd give a statement too. She said her silence about the stair incident had protected Danny when it should have protected her kids. Mom called 2 weeks later. Her voice sounded strained. She said they were selling the house and moving to a smaller place across town. I asked why. She said they couldn't afford to help with Hunter's medical bills and keep up their current lifestyle. The house had gotten too expensive anyway. I knew she was lying about the money being the main issue. They were facing consequences for enabling Danny all those years. Part of me felt bad for them. They were my parents and they were losing their home. But another part of me thought they deserved to feel some pain for all the pain they'd allowed Danny to cause. I told Mom I understood. She asked if we could help them pack. I said we'd think about it. Cooper said absolutely not when I told him. He said my parents made their choices and we weren't rewarding their behavior by making it easier. Brooke texted me in late March. She said Danny had started court-ordered therapy as part of the custody agreement. His therapist specialized in personality disorders and people who enjoyed hurting others. I asked how Danny was handling it. She said he was furious about what the diagnosis meant. He kept saying he didn't have a disorder and the therapist was biased against him. But he had to keep going if he wanted any chance at seeing Hunter without supervision. Brooke said the therapist had already written a report recommending extended treatment before unsupervised visits could even be considered. Danny would need years of weekly sessions and documented progress. I asked if she thought it would help. She said she didn't know. Some people never changed no matter how much therapy they got. But at least Hunter would be protected while Danny figured himself out. 4 months after the party, Brooke sent me photos. Hunter's face looked different. The swelling had gone down. The bruising had faded. But I could see the surgical scars and the way his nose sat slightly crooked. The caption said this was after his first surgery. More would come as he grew. I stared at the photos for a long time. Then I showed them to Mia during dinner. Her therapist had assigned homework about understanding consequences. Mia needed to see what her actions had caused. My daughter looked at the photos quietly. Then she started crying. Real crying. Not the fake tears kids use to get out of trouble. She sobbed and said she was sorry. She said she didn't think it would be that bad. She said she just wanted Uncle Danny to stop hurting kids. I held her while she cried and told her I understood, but it was still wrong. Cooper sat across from us with tears in his own eyes. Kylie and I met for coffee at the place near her house. We'd barely talked since the party except for quick phone calls about legal stuff. She looked tired. We sat down with our drinks and didn't speak for a minute. Then she said our family would never be the same. I agreed. She said maybe that was okay. Maybe safety was more important than the fake unity we'd been pretending to have. She admitted she was relieved her kids wouldn't be around Danny anymore. She'd been scared for years but didn't know how to protect them without causing family drama. Now the drama had happened anyway, and her kids were safer for it. I said the method of getting that safety was pretty awful, though. She nodded. She said Mia had done something terrible, but at least it finally forced everyone to face the truth about Danny. We sat there drinking coffee and acknowledging that sometimes protecting people means destroying the comfortable lies everyone agreed to believe. Mia wrote a letter to Hunter one evening after therapy. She knew he was too young to read it, but her therapist said writing it would help her process her feelings. I watched her work on it for over an hour. She kept erasing and rewriting. Finally, she showed it to me. The letter said she was wrong to hurt him because she was mad at his daddy. She said she should have told adults who would listen instead of taking revenge herself. She said she hoped when he was older he'd understand she was trying to protect other kids but did it the wrong way. She said she was sorry and would always be sorry. I asked if she wanted to send it to Brooke. She shook her head. She said it was for her, not for them. She needed to write down that she was wrong. I folded the letter and put it in my desk drawer. Maybe someday when Hunter was older we'd decide what to do with it. Cooper and I had a breakthrough in couples therapy during our 8th session. The therapist asked us to each say one thing we'd done wrong and one thing the other person had done wrong. Cooper went first. He said he should have pushed harder for boundaries with my family instead of letting me make all the decisions about contact with Danny. He said he'd failed Mia by not protecting her more. Then he said I'd chosen loyalty to my birth family over my daughter's well-being, and that wasn't okay. I wanted to defend myself, but I couldn't. He was completely right. I said I'd failed Mia by teaching her that family peace mattered more than safety. I said Cooper should have trusted his instincts about Danny, and I was sorry I'd made him doubt himself. The therapist said we were both taking responsibility now, and that was progress. She said rebuilding trust would take time, but we were moving in the right direction. Cooper reached for my hand again. We sat there holding hands and crying together. The family mediator scheduled one final session with just my parents, Cooper, Mia, and me. No Danny, no other family members, just us dealing with the core issues. We sat in a circle in her office. The mediator explained this session was about setting new boundaries and expectations going forward. My parents looked smaller somehow. Dad's hair had gotten grayer. Mom's hands shook when she held her coffee cup. The mediator asked what boundaries we needed. Cooper said we were limiting contact with my parents, and they needed to respect that without guilt trips. He said we'd decide when and how often we saw them based on what was healthy for Mia. My parents started to protest. The mediator held up her hand. She asked if they could agree to those terms. Mom looked at me with tears in her eyes. She asked if we'd ever forgive them. I said maybe someday, but right now we needed space. Dad asked about holidays. I said we'd see. The mediator asked if they'd respect our boundaries and stop trying to force us to reconcile with Danny. They both nodded slowly. I could see it broke their hearts, but they finally agreed. The mediator wrapped up our final session by scheduling individual follow-ups for everyone. She handed my parents a list of therapists who specialized in family systems and enabling behaviors. Dad folded the paper and put it in his pocket without looking at it. Mom asked if we could do family dinners again once everyone finished their therapy. I said maybe in a few months. We'd see how things went. The mediator walked us to the door and reminded my parents that respecting boundaries meant not calling every day to check on progress. She told them healing required space and time. They nodded, but I saw Mom's hands shaking as she picked up her purse. 3 weeks later, Brooke's divorce finalized. She called to tell me the settlement gave her primary custody of Hunter. Danny would need to complete 2 full years of therapy before he could have unsupervised visits. The judge reviewed all the evidence about Danny's pattern and decided a parent who enjoyed hurting children needed serious intervention before being alone with his own kid. Brooke said Danny signed everything without fighting because his lawyer told him a trial would expose even worse details. She said Danny was moving to a city 4 hours away for a fresh start where nobody knew about his history. I felt sad relief hearing that. My brother was finally facing real consequences even if he never fully took responsibility. He'd never admitted he enjoyed hurting those kids. He'd never apologized to any of them, but at least he couldn't hurt more children now. At least Hunter would be safe. Brooke thanked me for documenting everything even though it destroyed both our families. She said knowing the truth was better than living in denial. We hung up and I sat in my car crying for 20 minutes. Mia went back to the school after missing 2 weeks. Her teacher called me that first afternoon and said Mia seemed quieter and more thoughtful than before. She asked if everything was okay at home. I explained we'd had a family crisis and Mia was in therapy. The teacher said she'd keep an eye on things and let me know if she noticed anything concerning. Over the next few weeks, the teacher sent regular updates. Mia was doing her work, but she didn't raise her hand as much. She sat alone at lunch sometimes. She didn't join in the playground games like she used to. I worried constantly about long-term psychological effects of carrying the weight of hurting a baby. Mia's therapist said processing genuine remorse was healthy development. She said Mia was learning empathy in a deeper way than most kids her age. She said the quiet phase was normal while Mia figured out who she wanted to be after everything that happened. But I still watched my daughter at home and wondered if I'd destroyed her childhood by failing to protect her from Danny. Cooper came home one evening with news about a promotion at work. His boss had noticed how hard he'd been working despite our family crisis. The new position came with a significant raise that would help offset the therapy costs we were managing for our whole family. We sat at the kitchen table after Mia went to bed and looked at our budget. The extra money could go toward a vacation or home repairs or building up our savings again. Cooper said we should use it for continued counseling instead. He said we were all healing from years of dysfunction, and we couldn't stop treatment just because insurance had limits. I agreed completely. We decided therapy was more important than anything else right now. We could take vacations and fix the house later. Right now, we needed to fix ourselves. Cooper reached across the table and held my hand. He said he was proud of how I'd set boundaries with my parents. He said he knew it was hard, but it was the right thing for our family. I squeezed his hand back and felt grateful I'd married someone who prioritized our daughter's well-being over keeping peace. My first individual therapy session happened on a Tuesday morning. The therapist asked what brought me in, and I spent the full hour explaining my role in the family system. I told her about growing up with Danny and watching my parents excuse his behavior. I told her about choosing family loyalty over my daughter's safety. I told her about the guilt that kept me awake at night. The therapist listened without judging and then asked what I wanted to work on. I said I needed to learn how to set boundaries with my parents without feeling guilty. I said I needed to understand why I'd let things get so bad. She said we'd work on both those things together. Over the next several weeks, she helped me understand that protecting Mia now meant accepting I'd failed to protect her before. That was a grief I needed to carry. I couldn't fix the past, but I could make better choices going forward. She taught me that guilt without change was just self-pity. Real remorse meant doing things differently. Kylie called and invited us to a small gathering at her house. Just her family and ours. No other relatives. She wanted to test whether we could have normal family time without Danny present. I asked if she was sure, and she said she needed to know if our families could heal together. Cooper and I talked it over with Mia. Our daughter said she wanted to see her cousins again. She missed playing with them. We drove to Kylie's house on Saturday afternoon. The kids stood around awkwardly at first. Nobody knew how to act. Then Kylie's youngest asked if anyone wanted to play hide and seek. Mia nodded, and the kids scattered through the house. Cooper and I sat on the porch with Kylie and her husband. We drank lemonade and watched through the window as the kids gradually relaxed. They started laughing. They started running around like normal kids. Kylie said this was what healthy family interaction looked like without fear. I realized she was right. For years, family gatherings had been tense because everyone was watching Danny and protecting their kids. Now the kids could just be kids. It felt strange and wonderful at the same time. Mia's therapist called me in for an update meeting after 8 weeks of sessions. She said Mia was making significant progress in developing empathy and understanding that violence wasn't justice even when someone deserved consequences. She said my daughter was learning to separate revenge from accountability. She said Mia was starting to understand that hurting Hunter didn't actually fix anything Danny had done. The therapist asked if Mia had talked to me about her feelings lately. I said not much. That evening, I sat with Mia in her room and asked how therapy was going. She was quiet for a long time. Then she said she wished she'd told me years ago how scared she was of Danny instead of planning revenge. She said she thought adults wouldn't listen, so she had to handle it herself. She said now she understood there were better ways to protect people. I hugged her and apologized for not creating a safe space where she could tell me she was scared. I promised I'd always listen from now on. 5 months after Hunter's party, Brooke sent me a message through social media. She said Hunter was healing well physically. The surgeries had gone better than expected. His nose would look normal once he finished growing. His teeth could be replaced with implants when he was older. She said she was grateful the incident exposed Danny's pattern before Hunter was old enough to become a target himself. She said she'd been reading about sadistic personality traits and recognizing signs she'd missed during their marriage. She didn't offer forgiveness, but she acknowledged that Mia's action, while wrong, had prevented future abuse. She said if Danny had continued unchecked, he probably would have started tripping Hunter once the boy was old enough to walk steadily. She said at least now Hunter would grow up protected. I read the message 3 times and cried. It wasn't forgiveness, but it was understanding. That was more than I'd expected. My parents visited for Mia's 9th birthday. The gathering was awkward but peaceful. Mom asked permission before hugging Mia. Dad kept his distance and let Mia approach him first. We had clear boundaries about not discussing Danny or defending past choices. My parents followed the rules. They brought a thoughtful present and sat quietly while Mia opened gifts. They sang happy birthday without making it about themselves. They left after 2 hours without guilt tripping us about not staying longer. I watched my mother interact carefully with Mia and saw genuine remorse in how she asked permission before hugging her granddaughter. She didn't assume she had the right to physical affection anymore. She waited for Mia to decide. That small change meant everything. Cooper surprised Mia and me with a weekend trip to the beach. We drove 3 hours to the coast and stayed in a small hotel. Mia played in the waves while Cooper and I sat on the sand watching her. She was laughing and splashing and acting like a normal kid. That evening, we walked along the pier eating ice cream. Mia asked if our family was okay now. Cooper and I looked at each other. I told her honestly that we were healing and learning to be better. I said sometimes families have to break apart the wrong way of doing things before they can build something healthier. I said we were building something new together. Mia nodded and licked her ice cream. She said she felt safer now. She said she liked that we talked about hard things instead of pretending everything was fine. I saw Emily at the grocery store 3 weeks later. She was reaching for pasta sauce when I recognized her from the 4th of July party. Her daughter stood beside her, now 7 years old, wearing a pink shirt with the sleeves rolled down despite the warm weather. Emily noticed me and froze. I expected anger or for her to turn away. Instead, she walked over. She pulled up her daughter's sleeve without asking permission. The scars were there, faint pink lines running up the girl's forearm where the sparkler burns had healed. They'd fade more over time, she told me. The doctor said by her teenage years they'd barely show. She thanked me then, which I didn't expect. She said what Mia did was terrible and wrong, but it finally held Danny accountable when nothing else had worked. She admitted she'd been sleeping better knowing he couldn't hurt more children. Her daughter wouldn't have nightmares anymore about family gatherings where adults didn't protect her. I didn't know what to say. Emily squeezed my hand once and walked away with her daughter. The final family therapy session happened on a Tuesday morning. Mia sat in her usual chair across from the therapist. I sat in the corner like always, watching my daughter process everything she'd done. The therapist asked Mia what she'd learned over these months. Mia was quiet for a long time. Then she said she couldn't control other people's choices, but she could control her own responses. She said she'd learned that protecting people sometimes meant telling adults who would listen, not taking revenge herself. She talked about how she wished she'd told me years ago that Danny scared her instead of planning what she did to Hunter. The therapist nodded and made notes. She asked Mia what she'd do differently if she could go back. Mia said she'd tell me the truth about being afraid. She'd ask for help instead of thinking she had to fix everything alone. The session ended with the therapist saying Mia had made real progress in understanding healthy boundaries. We scheduled one more follow-up for next month, then Mia would be done with therapy. Cooper and I celebrated our anniversary at home. We ordered takeout and sat on the couch after Mia went to bed. He told me he was proud of how I'd set boundaries with my parents. I told him I was grateful he never gave up on our family when things got bad. We talked about how close we'd come to losing our marriage over family problems. Cooper admitted there were nights after Hunter's party when he wasn't sure we'd survive it. I said the same thing. But we'd chosen to fight for our relationship instead of letting it break. We'd chosen to protect Mia even when that meant facing hard truths about my family. Cooper held my hand and said we were building something better now. Something healthier. I believed him. 6 months after Hunter's party, I watched Mia play with her cousins at Kylie's house. They were running in the backyard, laughing and chasing each other. Mia looked peaceful in a way she hadn't before. Kylie stood beside me at the kitchen window. She said the kids seemed happy. I agreed. We'd built something safer from the broken pieces of our family. The relationships with Danny and my parents would never be the same. Danny lived in another city now. My parents visited sometimes but followed our rules. Mia was learning healthy boundaries and genuine responsibility for her choices. It wasn't perfect. Hunter still had surgeries ahead. Mia still had therapy homework about processing what she'd done. But we were healing in ways that mattered. Sometimes justice came at a terrible cost, and sometimes the best outcome possible was learning to build something better from the damage. That's how it went down for me. Now I want to hear how you see it. Drop your thoughts in the comments. I'll be checking through them later.